Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Jonny Enoch. Before we bring him on, a couple of announcements. Coming March 11th, 12th, and 13th, we've got Forbidden Knowledge News Con. We're going to have 8 amazing presenters. It's going to be online with a Rokfin premium membership. You get the entire conference for only $10. Just sign up through that link in the description, and you get access to the conference, all our premium content, all the content from every creator on Rokfin, all new episodes first, and the previous conferences. The free episodes, the new ones are always available on Rokfin as well as Odysee and all podcast platforms. Our website, forbiddenknowledge.news, which is also the home of the Forbidden Knowledge Network. We feature podcasts from our wonderful community. Also, be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All those links are right there in the description for you. And be sure to check out C60 Purple Power. This may be the most powerful antioxidant known to man, and the benefits have been personally outstanding. But you need to check it out for yourself. Just click the link in the description. Check out their website, see what they offer. And if you order, you get 10% off plus free shipping. Today I want to welcome back to the show Jonny Enoch. He is a clinical hypnotherapist, lecturer, and writer from Vancouver, BC, Canada. Not only has he been researching extraterrestrial phenomena and esoteric subjects for over 20 years, but after witnessing a series of unexplainable events while growing up, his search for answers has led him on adventures all over the world. His goal is to prepare the public for full disclosure and create a peaceful future that includes space exploration and the development of consciousness-based sciences. Currently, he is a featured speaker on the Serpentine Mysteries Tour of Peru with Brian Forrester and the Ancient Mysteries Tour of Egypt. He is also writing a book on advanced civilizations and ancient consciousness technologies. Jonny, welcome back. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Chris. Thanks for having me back on Forbidden Knowledge News.
It's awesome to talk again, man. Always an amazing conversation. It was also amazing hanging out with you at the conference last year. Hopefully we can meet again in the future, but you're like on the other side of the world. You're in Budapest now, is it?
Yeah, that was a lot of fun over at the UFO MegaCon, Chris. It was great to see you doing your thing there, interviewing everyone. And we always have a great time at those conferences, and I'm sure we'll do it again. I am in Budapest, but I live here half time, and then the other half time I live over in Canada because there's so many great things to do on both continents.
Yeah. Well, Canada is under a lot of strain right now, which I think we should talk a little bit about tonight. I want to get into all the things that are going on right now because people are living in a lot of fear, and I think that it's good that we should address that because I don't think it's necessary. Like you and I were kind of briefly talking before, you think it's all part of this kind of master plan that's unfolding, and this kind of has to happen, and I want to get into that. But first, it's been a while since you've been on. I know you've had a few UFO sightings and paranormal experiences. Since we've spoken, have you had any profound experiences?
Chris, every day there's strange occurrences and profound experiences if we know what to look for. And I do a lot of traveling. So sometimes I'm over in the UK or Egypt, where I just was a couple weeks ago. And I always meet people who have these incredible abilities, or you see these strange occurrences that take place. If you know what to look for in your life, you can find them all around us. So I would say there isn't one day where it doesn't go on, but things seem to be accelerating for us right now as a whole in the world, as you've noticed. And I don't know where you want to start, but there's a lot that's taking place in the world right now.
Well, let's start with some of the obvious things that are in the news and everybody's kind of in fear about. It all started, 2020, of course, was our big shifting point with COVID and then everything that happened after that. And it seemed to be a strange narrative after strange agenda just unfolding. And now it appears that there is the war agenda unfolding. And of course, I think, all these things are designed to keep people in a state of fear and a level of just being terrified of what could be happening next to kind of keep these people under control. I don't know what you think about that.
There is a lot of fear in the world, and people have this feeling when they watch the news, and they're told to constantly be in this state. But if you want to know what I think, as someone who lives out in Eastern Europe most of the time, is that what you're going to see that will happen with Russia next is this situation that is occurring in Russia. As I've talked about this before, I said this last year on Fade to Black with Jimmy Church. I talked about this on Jay Widener's show, that during this month, Russia would come into Ukraine. And after they're done with Ukraine, this is going to be a process that unfolds over the next 5 years, where Eastern Europe is going to become part of this CIS. And you're going to see this area of these independent Russian states where, when they do this process, I believe it's going to be in such a way that when Russia, for example, comes into Hungary, this isn't going to be a struggle. They'll just set up shop in Budapest. They will send their ships up through the Danube into the rest of Europe, and you will eventually see the EU and Germany break off and do their own thing. And of course, this has consequences. We've seen this with Germany. We've seen where they normally have a very good relationship because Angela Merkel and Putin had this school-like relationship for a very long time, even though she's not in power there anymore. So you're going to see the EU break off. But this tension that you see right now is also going to unfold into something else. When we saw the Olympics taking place, a little bit of delay, there was a little bit of a calm before the storm there. I think what you're going to see now is that China is going to move into Taiwan. They're going to have their eyes on other places. And over the next 3-4 years, this is going to unfold into other things. But soon we're going to move into an era where there aren't going to be wars fought with missiles and nukes. It's going to be cyber warfare and quantum communication networks. And this is all unfolding into this future where we're headed. There's going to be great things ahead in our future. We have a bright future, but there's a lot to go through in the next 15 years. My sources that are benevolent, I will just say that, and they have a lot invested into the future of humanity. They tell me that we have a very bright future ahead, except there's going to be some tremendous ups and downs we have to go through. And what I mean that is that every day is a gift. And let's just say what will unfold right now is going to unfold into even greater things in 3 or 4 years that will be even more dramatic. So if there's stuff you want to do, there's never a better time to do it than right now. Do it. Do the things that you've always been dreaming of doing. Do them and live your life. There's going to be incredible transformations in the world. And there's going to be even stranger events on geophysical events and all sorts of strange things that will unfold. But this is all part of the human destiny. And all of these things, after they pass, will turn into even greater momentums as we're experiencing growing pains as we become a type 1 civilization.
Man, we were incarnated in a pretty damn interesting time, right? Now, one of the big worries right now is nuclear war and total annihilation of the human race. I'm not sure I see that happening. First of all, I think that those in power want to keep this kind of machine running, and there may be off-planet interests that won't let that happen either. I know that they've, presumably been interacting and shutting off nuclear facilities for a long time now. What do you think about that? Do you think that they would allow something like this, or that could occur?
Well, the human race is very protected, Chris. It really is. There are, let's just say, gardeners of humanity looking out at this progress that we're making on Earth, and there's a lot more going on behind the scenes than people think. A lot of people out there in the conspiracy realm of things, they want to say, is there a secret society controlling things? Well, there are secret societies in the world. There always have been. They want to say, is it just a certain wealthy family we can put our thumb on? Is that who's doing it? Is it the Greys? Is it the reptilians? Is it the Andromedas? Or who's doing it? So the answer is that it's not that simple. There are all different kinds of groups overseeing our progress. They're not always getting involved. They're not always having interventions, so to speak, because if you've ever watched Star Trek, that was written by Gene Roddenberry, that the concepts in there, like the Prime Directive, which was given to him in a download in that Writers Guild he was a part of, that means that they don't necessarily get involved in our progress and our day-to-day struggles and even the overall progress of humanity. Unless it's really dire, there won't be a direct intervention. But these different groups that are looking out for us, they will step in now and then if there's something that is going to completely stop our progress altogether. And let me just give a better perspective to this, is that this is going to sound really far out there for people. But in the realm I deal with a lot of extraterrestrial contactees. I've worked in the field of clinical hypnotherapy, doing regressions with people and doing a lot of investigations into this area. So I've interfaced with a lot of people in this realm of working with these beings. And from what I gather, even from my insider sources, is that the folks that are here watching us and they're observing us, that a lot of them also have their own agendas. And some of these folks, they have the ability to affect our reality. They have the ability to look at our timeline on Earth, and they have time travel capabilities. And that's when we bring in something called quantum multiplicity. And there's something called lineal subjugation. Now, Chris, one of the limitations that you and I have, and the listeners and the viewers of Forbidden Knowledge News have, is that we in our DNA have this time-space positioning that we have since birth, that we're aware of this moment here and now. And in reality, this is an illusion through this lineal subjugation. In reality, everything is happening all around you at all times. And if you didn't have this configuration, this limitation, it would be so overwhelming for you, everything coming at you at all times. You know, the Chris that's interviewing me right now, the Chris that was at the UFO MegaCon, you know, enjoying a strawberry sundae, the Chris next week that's watching his favorite TV show, all of that's happening right now at the same time. Now, imagine being so powerful that they have the ability to not only affect events right now, but in the future, but in the past, they can go back and forth through a cross-pollination of realities. So we have folks that are coming here, and some of them have their own agendas, Chris, and they come to certain groups and they get involved. Now, I'm not saying that everything in our world that happens here is completely because of extraterrestrials. There's a lot of human involvement and day-to-day stuff, but we are being influenced from other sources, and there are other agendas here. Have you ever heard this before?
I definitely have. And there's a few of them that I'd like to get into right now. But as far as the extraterrestrial relationship with us, there's also supposedly hybridization programs going on. And I've spoken with a few that claim to be ET hybrids on my shows recently. And it's very interesting that they claim that, you know, amongst some of the hybrids, there's different types. There's reptilians, there's, beings from the Pleiades. But do you think that most of these beings interacting with us are mostly humanoid and could, pass for human and are here interacting with us on Earth?
Well, let me give you some perspective, first of all, before we get into the hybrids, about how extraterrestrials interact with us, how they can affect our reality, as well as what they have done to influence us overall in our progress.
Yeah.
If you go back into the end of the 1300s, this is during the Ming Dynasty in China. There was this great explorer that worked for the emperor there, and his name was Zheng He. If you look this up, it's Zheng He. He was a eunuch, and these eunuchs, they were out in these things called treasure ships. And these treasure ships went all over the place in the world into the early 15th century. They were mapping things out, but they were also meeting up with certain folks and sharing ancient secrets. You know, they were sharing their knowledge about maps, about mathematics and skills they had. And just to give you an example of how impressive this was, these treasure ships, are the black ships of China, as they were called. They were each the size of the Titanic, some say. And one may have had all agriculture on it. One may have had all water. One may have had, you know, different treasures and riches. And it was like a floating city on the ocean. Well, the word is that it reached the shores of Italy during the times of the Medici banking family. It met with them. And then it shared with the Venetian glassmakers the secrets of how to make mirrors. So they shared all this secret knowledge. But even then, you had this knowledge spreading around the world and folks going to places. If you look back at our history, Chris, if you go back into the 1300s, the 1400s, 1500s, look at the time of Henry VIII and all that, not much changed. People were riding horses. They were dying of plagues and illnesses. They were miserable. You know, they were cold. They didn't live past about 45. You were considered old if you made it to that age. And that's why you got married and had kids when you were a teenager. And so not much changed even from then into the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, 1900s. You go up into that period of the early 20th century, things really took off and changed after 1947. So after 1947, it's been outlined with the likes of Colonel Corso in the book called A Day After Roswell, that's when the stuff that started to come out from that crash then, at the Roswell crash. And there were other crashes, but that's when that stuff started to get leaked out. And we got transistors, we had LEDs, you had Velcro, you had nitinol, which is nickel and titanium memory metal. All that stuff was given to certain people and brought out to certain inventors, or they were helped so that it looked like it was a natural development. But that stuff has influenced us to the point today, Chris, where we're at least 100 years beyond where we should be. We should be driving around in T-model Fords. We now have technology in our hands that is beyond our regular evolution, and we're being helped. We're being sped along. But what's happened since then is we intentionally were allowed to keep a ship. We kept a little gray EB1 longer than we should have, and other beings that came along. We kept them, which wasn't fair to them, but we learned from them. And our governments were helped. The Germans had help. The governments of the world, just like China is getting help right now. If you look at all these 80 million empty apartments they have, you might ask yourself, why are they empty? Could those be for types of hybrids? Could those be for folks coming from other places? And with that being said, we have these overseers in our progress, and we have been a genetic experiment. We know that when we look at our DNA and these extra codons we have and how we're put together. And I know I've encountered people that have these hybrid qualities to them, just as you have. And have you ever, in these encounters with these folks that you have met, Chris, have you ever witnessed any abilities that were beyond your regular explanations?
Other than intuitive or maybe psychic abilities, not really, no.
Well, I'll tell you a story. This is a true story. I have a friend, and he came with me to that UFO conference where you and I were, if you remember it. And he met this lady there, and she said she was a hybrid. Now, all of us at some point, we've all been hybridized and our genetics have been manipulated. And many of us have been a part of a hybridization program. That's been one of the interests that the Ebens that have been coming here, they've been very interested in doing these sorts of experiments, and they're very invested in us. However, it's a bit shocking when you see their capabilities up close. He met this lady, and they became closely acquainted. And one night during the conference, she said, "I'm going to show you who I really am." And this story that he told me the next morning when he came down for coffee, and he was sober, and he's a guy I've known for some time. He doesn't lie, doesn't make things up. He was white as a ghost in the morning. His eyes were popping out of his head when he told me this story. So I know this story happened to him. He said that she grabbed him by the wrists and pushed her thumbs into his wrists and held him and said, "I'm going to show you who I really am." She looked into his eyes, and all of a sudden her head grew into this larger gray extraterrestrial head with the large almond eyes, the dolphin-like gray skin, and her ears disappeared, her nose disappeared in this little mouth. And he said he was terrified, this shock that he had just seen this in front of him. He said, "She showed me who she really was, and she could read his thoughts. She knew everything about him." He said when he was with her, sometimes he would just get these flashes that he was on a ship with these other grays and strange things. And she actually was some sort of a hybrid that was crossed with these abilities. And I've talked to other people that maybe they've been on the ships and they've had these experiences with them, or they've had kids with them. So it's very different depending on who you talk to.
It certainly is, and I know exactly who you're talking about, so that is super fascinating, what you just told me. Yeah, I'm going to have to do some research into that. Now, earlier, a few minutes ago, you mentioned EB1. Is that the alien interview, and was that real?
I've been told that interview is real. There's all sorts of people on the internet that look at these videos and this footage, and they analyze it. The EB1 footage, or the EB1 story of the being that came from Roswell, it's disputed whether that's the same as the famous Victor footage. And of course, there is the Skinny Bob footage and others. But I just had a conversation actually about this with Richard Doty, who is on Gaia's Cosmic Disclosure. And I know a lot of people out there will, they'll have debates about this, but yeah, EB1, from all the sources I've talked to, that really took place. That really happened. And it wasn't the first crash. It's not the first set of beings that we've had from craft. It's remarkable, though, that this is coming out now.
It certainly is. And along with all the other information that's coming out, and you mentioned Rick Doty, there are several individuals that are former intelligence and that have become whistleblowers or former military in some of these black projects, and they're disclosing some incredible information, just like Mr. Doty. His presentation at the conference really blew me away. But then again, I always wonder, intelligence, is he still intelligence? Is there a reason that they're letting these gentlemen disclose this information now? And why is it coinciding with everything that's happening in the mainstream media, everything that's attempted to be putting out by the Pentagon, and, these high-level individuals that are suddenly propped up to this level of kind of stardom out of nowhere? And it's very interesting. I'd like to get your thoughts on it.
Well, whenever you're dealing with someone from the intelligence community, and I've talked to a few folks from that community behind the scenes, ones that don't come forward, they always have to have plausible deniability. So if they start talking and they're telling you a story, and this is true of Sergeant Major Bob Dean, or even Clifford Stone, or one of those folks that, they've now passed away, but they did incredible work on the Disclosure Project at the National Press Club, and over the years talking about this subject and really giving it a lot of light from someone with a great background doing this. Let's say you heard Sergeant Major Bob Dean talk about when he was at the military and he was involved with SHAPE, Supreme Headquarters, Allied Powers, Europe, and he's talking about a certain document. He might change just a little bit about the name of that document or what it was called, just so that from a legal standpoint, that he has this plausible deniability. And a lot of people out there, they can sit on their armchair, they can easily be critics from home, but they don't understand how much pressure these folks in the intelligence community are in. Like, they're being monitored, and we're all being monitored to a certain extent by the AI in our chat programs or whatever's looking for these sort of things, but they have to be very, very careful. So, for example, they don't want to talk out of school, as it's called. And when they might refer to something in a story to you, they might have to change a certain word to something else. Now, it's very easy to look at that and say, oh, one of these guys out there are lying, or they're changing something on purpose. They're just trying to protect their ass. But at the same time, they're trying to give you a very important story. And it reminds me of guys that will sit on there on YouTube, and there might be someone on YouTube that's giving this incredible presentation on the secrets of the universe and giving out the most amazing math formula. And there'll be people on YouTube in the comments criticizing what the guy's wearing and saying, well, I don't like this yellow shirt because it has check marks on it or something, right? And it's just like, really, do you not understand the profundities of what you're being told, that even if you read between the lines, it's absolutely incredible, right?
Yes, it definitely is. I mean, we're living in extremely fascinating times. What are your thoughts on why the Pentagon, the government, media is not really pushing disclosure? Because they'll put a little bit out there and reel it back, and put a little bit out there and say it was swamp gas or the Russians. And we have, these new departments formed in the Pentagon that supposedly are monitoring UAP activity. It's just strange that these series of events are happening now. Do you think it's this kind of like preparation?
Our governments have been getting help for a long time, and the different governments are getting help from different folks. And how it's been explained to me by contacts I know that have been involved with special access programs, they told me a while back that it's almost competitive, that you'll get, let's say there's groups that have been helping the United States, and they are working within a certain structure that they have their own trade programs. Let's say they're doing manufacturing or trade with these certain groups, and that does go on. What happens is that one group will say, I'm going to give you this type of technology, or I'm going to help you in this particular area over here. And what will happen is that another group in another area, they'll be helping another country or another government, and it'll almost be competitive, that they'll give them an upper hand, or they have their own agendas that they want to get involved in. Everybody has their own agendas, and they're all getting these different cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. But with that being said, people always come to me and they say, when is disclosure going to happen? Just like you just mentioned, the Pentagon is out there and they're helping, bring this subject to the forefront by saying they're investigating UAPs. There is going to be a lot more that has to take place over the next 15 years before we make these discoveries fully. It's not going to be long, as we enter this next period and we get out of this decade. It won't be long until you're making discoveries. We have the James Webb telescope out there. You're going to discover stuff out in our solar system and life, just like you're discovering little bits of life around Venus right now. I always bug Mark D'Antonio because he's got this background with studying astrophysics as well as astronomy. I bug him because I was told not too long ago that we would make a discovery in Europa, when you go up to the moon of Jupiter, that there's these 25-foot wide whale-like creatures swimming around under the surface, this watery surface. And I always come back to him every year and I bug him and I say, what do you know yet? And he always says, well, we know there's water there, but we haven't found the whales yet. He goes, maybe there's something there, but I always bug him because he's got his eye on it. And I said, when that comes out mainstream, you're going to find out more and more. And what's going to happen, Chris, is that we're being geared up. But I want you to know that you're going to make this incredible progress in the future. And 25 years from now, these discoveries that we make over this next decade period as we go through it are going to lead to humans on Earth, the first humans going out to exoplanets and living there.
Well, that being said, how far ahead, you said our technologies, in the public, at least 100 years farther than it should have been, evolutionary wise. How ahead do you think our hidden technologies are, the ones from black projects that we aren't being told about? Do we have a secret space program where we can access jump rooms and med beds and regress people to 20 and back programs and put their consciousness in clones and all this incredible things you hear from, people that claim to be in these black projects?
Well, from my conversations with folks that are really in the know, and I don't mean to dismiss any of these stories, which some of them, they are very sensationalized, but I know that there are elements of truth into all of those areas. Yes, we do have secret space programs. There is a type of way that consciousness can be transferred, and they do have these avatar-like bodies that some folks use, and that's a different question. We can get into that right after this area about traveling through space. But essentially what you have to realize is that the space travel we're talking about, being able to go light years, it doesn't have to take years or months or weeks like some people have described it. We're not going to use warp speed engines or anything like that. Even the secret engine that NASA is talking about building right now, where they're like, okay, it's going to take 20 years for us to get, a few light years away. It's going to be much quicker than that, like days to a week, to get to places very quickly. And I'll tell you how the science of that works. And everybody at home can research this for themselves. So it's not just me that's just talking a lot of trash. So as it's been explained to me, how this works is that you take essentially time, gravity, and linear proportional distance, and you fold it in on itself. So you have this transpositioning that's taking place, and it's folding it in on itself, just like pizza dough. You're reconfiguring itself. And this works just like the messenger pigeons that you used to get at the time of Genghis Khan. He was using these messenger pigeons to go very long distances. He was the first one to really develop the perfected system of airmail. Others used it. You had the Syrians and the Romans and others that used it, but he's the first one to really give us the airmail system. So you think about this, going to point A to point B to point C, to go somewhere in these bursts. How you would do that is that you take this harmonic oscillation and you would bring that field around. You would be able to create this field that you move in. And something I was told to tell everybody at home to research is research this, look this up. Look up transverse sound waves instead of longitudinal sound waves. And you'll find that you can affect waveform propagation. Because what people have to realize is that harmonics can be very dangerous. Okay? So when we talk about harmonics, what happens is that it takes very little energy for you to change the harmonic resonance of the atoms in your body. And if we change them so they're not the same as the ones below you on the floor, and they're not relative, this is where relativity comes in, you'll fall right to the floor. And you'll be way down into the earth. We could use this same ability to make it so you could have anti-gravitics. You could walk through walls. You could change the subjective reality all around you. And so this technology is going to revolutionize us. And I want to give you another thing to think about. In 25 years from now, when the first people are getting the opportunity to leave this planet, there will be about 100 ships at a time that will leave, with about 1,000 people on each ship, and it will be just like a cruise ship. And folks will go out, and some won't have a choice to go, just like Bezos and Musk are saying today. But as it's been told to me, those are the first folks that will get to leave our planet, and it will be very exciting for them.
Wow, that is incredible. A few days ago, I had Jim Goodall on. We were talking about Darcy Weir's new film, Rise of the TR-3B. That alone is incredible. But as far as our space travel tech, it seems like we should have something, much farther advanced than a TR-3 by now. And I think a lot of, possibly what we're seeing, they're showing us, is our own technology that we're seeing in the sky. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, there's a lot of tech that we have, even that those TikTok incidents and everything that the folks in China, or we have tech like that in these black projects and unbelievable things that they can do. However, I want to really mention this, that it's not as simple as just having great craft that can do this, which we're on the cusp of these things. There's all kinds of technology that's going to be given to us right now. And people have no idea how far we are with technology, even biological, technological interfacing, things that can enhance the body, strange things that we could get into if you want to go down that rabbit hole. People always get spooked out when you talk about transhumanism, but they have no idea that how far ahead that technology is as well. But one of the key problems that you have is when you go out into space, we have to think about how we have the Schumann resonance here on Earth. And as soon as you leave this planet, your atomic structure changes. And that's one thing that's been told to me many times by folks in these programs. And one of the crazy things is that once you go out into space and that resonance isn't there, and let's say you want to come to another planet, like the folks that come here, like EBA-1, and Dodie will tell you this, and other people will tell you this, that when you look at EBA-1, he had to have in his chambers where he was, he couldn't survive outside of it for a few hours without having special gravity adjustments. And some of the beings had to have like methane added to where they're breathing, where that would be very dangerous to us. Well, it's the same thing. If you leave this planet and you go elsewhere, it's the worst sickness that you're ever going to have. It's going to be worse than seasickness, which they say is the worst sickness you can have. So some of the beings coming here, a lot of them have their own ways of acclimating. They have different technologies that they use. And this is where it gets really interesting. It's very interesting, like even looking at our future of going to other exoplanets. So in some means you'd use technology to do this. In some means you'd use certain drugs to do this. Kind of like when you go on a cruise ship, if you've ever been on a boat and you get a seasickness, there's different, patches you can use and pills you probably encountered. So the other ways to do this is you could have an avatar situation. And I know you were talking about earlier of this cloning or consciousness. That's absolutely possible. And what that's called is it's called a transpositioning of consciousness. And it's very simple to understand the science for how that works. And the best way I can describe the transpositioning, or you might call that superpositioning in quantum physics or mechanics, is that if you look up the work of Professor Stuart Hameroff over at the University of Arizona in Tucson and look up Sir Roger Penrose, they have these theories called quantum consciousness. And what's really fascinating about this is they have looked at how your consciousness works in your brain. You have these things called microtubules, and they're like a micro girder system where your consciousness sits in you like a cockpit. Okay. And what's interesting about this is that how this works is that your consciousness, they know through like EEGs, you have this brainwave scan that's unique to you. It's your own song. It's the song of your consciousness. It makes this aspect of it have anharmic vibrations, and anharmic vibrations are just like Indian music, like the sitars, which is really interesting. Well, that unique song to you, we can triangulate it and use it like an IP address on a quantum communications network. We can have that as your unique signal that no one has like you. It's like your own frequency. You can identify it from anywhere, just like there are satellites out in space that can identify your biorhythms. And believe it or not, I know I'm segueing a little bit here, and this might be a little far out for people.
No, that's great.
That there have been, well, thank you, but there have been military installations that your access or your key or your password to get into them have been a satellite scan of your biorhythms. As I've been told that they could actually identify you and know if you're in a house or wherever you are, they could find that. Now, what's interesting about this is that imagine you can triangulate that signal of your consciousness, that song of your consciousness that's held together through quantum cohesion in a superpositioning. It's like the concept of quantum entanglement. And you could transfer that into another body, or you could use it like you could upload it into a machine, so to speak. And this is going to bridge into all kinds of areas that are very strange, because the other aspect of this, and this is going to get really crazy for people, is that the folks that are visiting us, all the different types of grays and ETs, well, some of them have these android or half biological, half machine-like units where they can share their consciousness in this area. And if any of you have listened to the fellow named Tim, the tactical advisor from Germany that my friend Sid Goldberg has on the Cosmic Disclosure show, he talks about this concept on there. And I have heard this before, which are a time-traveling species of extraterrestrial. They get these little helper drones.
You broke up when you said what species that was. What species was that? You broke up for a second.
To just split this up, the folks on the inside have always known that there's different types of grays. There's not only the folks that we call the Ebens, the extraterrestrial biological entities, and we call these the Orion group, that they come from Orion. But there's these other folks that are the grays that essentially and allegedly originated in the universe before ours, that evolved into our universe. And they've gotten rid of their biological forms. And these grays, who, again, have incredible, vast abilities, they have had this ability to interface with us in all kinds of ways. And they have been invested into us, and they have been very evasive, and they have been here monitoring us for some time and getting involved in human history. There's a lot we could go into with that if we had the time. Well, essentially, these groups, they have their own little helper drones. And these droids are sort of like the ones that you get people saying that, hey, I had this little gray that was interfacing with me. Often it belongs to the larger gray, but they can have multiples of these that are connected to their consciousness. So it's like, imagine if you could take yourself, Chris, and split yourself into 3 mini Chris's that are connected to your consciousness, like through a superpositioning, that you had this vast cerebral cognitive ability to control them and have all the information come back to you, and they interface with them, and it's like they could do scouting, reconnaissance missions, and everything else. I'm pretty remarkable, right?
Yeah, and that would explain a lot about these encounters with those little grays. I want to get into something that it's a concern for a lot of people, and I've had guests on recently that claim that we are already kind of in the midst of this sort of AI takeover, where AI affects a lot of even our biology and our thinking, and it's been kind of infiltrating humanity for a while, even before our modern technological systems. I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Well, let me just paint one more picture for you before we get into AI. When you think about the future of our civilization, I'm talking like 30,000 years from now. This is going to sound far out for a lot of people listening to this, and maybe it's not relevant for people to hear this right now. But think about in the future when the descendants of the humans on Earth are living out in other places. Think about the idea that there is a human being that would be half biological, half technological, with a microcellular tissue where you could generally change your appearance at will, or change wherever you want to be at will. Now, think about the movie Avatar. Now, that movie portrays this concept that we're talking about with the transpositioning of consciousness very well. Let's say you want to explore another planet, but you couldn't acclimate there. So you had a body that was generated or grew there that could handle the gravity, could handle the atmosphere very well. One way of thinking about this is that today, you and I are used to living in certain conditions. But 50,000 years ago, Chris, our ancestors here on Earth had less gravity and more oxygen. If you wanted to bring back the dinosaurs today, they couldn't live in this environment. You couldn't really do the Jurassic Park scenario. So you think about the fact that you could be on a ship and you're beaming your consciousness down like a receiver, and it's kind of like playing virtual reality or wherever you want to go, you could literally see and move and live in that body, like the show Altered Carbon on Netflix. Now, think about this. There was a story I heard from a very, let's just say, advanced inside person that had access to these sort of programs. And they had told me something that was remarkable. They said about 30 years ago, they were in an underground facility in Nevada, and they saw that they were developing these things called military grade holograms. And these holograms worked on a photonic science, and a photon moves at about 300,000 kilometers per second. And so they said that these things had denser subatomic particles. And they said that a woman could enter the room with a document, hand it to you, shake your hand, and then disappear before your eyes. And they said that's how it advanced it had gotten. I've also been told that sometimes on Earth, we have interacted with these artificially constructed chimerous energetic artificial intelligences. So a chimerous, is something that it could change form, right? And it's an energetic structure like this. Now, picture the ability that you could have sort of a holographic structure that you could have and use like an avatar. When we talk about AI, artificial intelligence, this is a rather interesting subject, though, the one you asked me about. With AI, a lot of people out there, they have this knee-jerk reaction, and they think immediately it's some evil, bad thing. There are dangers with AI. There's no doubt about it, and we have to discuss those. But for the most part, everybody is using artificial intelligence today. It's called machine learning, and it's been enhancing our lives in all kinds of ways. You have it in your phone when you're taking a picture. It's figuring out the better way to adjust your aperture, your light, all these various aspects of our computer, our search engines, our fridges these days, our cars, everything's running on AI, including Zoom. Zoom is AI. So AI, for the most part, has been beneficial for us in our everyday lives. Right now, AI works on absolutes. So it's not really capable of going too far out there. When we start looking at where AI is going, though, in 15 years, that's when we're going to have to worry. Because let's just say we start talking about robotics and robots. Where I live here in Budapest, we have a cafe. You can look this up. If you type in Budapest and then robot cafe, we have a cafe here that is run by robots. It has robots that come up and clean your table. There's a cute little Wall-E-like robot that takes your order. They'll bring you out your drinks. They sanitize your tables. They do everything. You go to the mall. We have a brand new mall here, and there's a robot. When I first saw this, it freaked me out. It was so futuristic. It was like the Jetsons. This robot comes up. It's moving its arms. It's blinking its eyes, and it's got a tablet on it, and it's talking, and it's asking me, what do I want? What kind of store do I want to go to? It can move. It can go with you. It's so futuristic. It's crazy. But even with the robots we're developing, it's not until we have the capability to put a quantum computer in their heads, which we're ways off from right now. As soon as we can put a quantum computer in a robot's head, then we got to start getting into some serious debates, because then you don't have AI, regular AI anymore. You have something called synthetic intelligence. And you don't just have these absolutes and ones and zeros and Moore's law. We're moving in a whole different direction. With quantum computing, we're aware of everything in the universe. It can think for itself. It becomes self-aware. And then we're going to be looking at, should we be treating robots like servants, or should we give them human rights? And right now, we've seen some dangerous things, like we've seen the experiment with the frog eggs and taking AI and being able to duplicate itself. And if you had that and you gave that into some wrong hands, like some sort of military genius out there, and he's like, hey, let's hook that up over there, and you have this self-replicating super soldier system, that could get very dangerous. So we do have some dangers with it. But for the most part, that's there. And I think, the extraterrestrials and the beings that are here, they already have, they've already crossed this Rubicon. They have ability to use consciousness and androids and bots and all that stuff beyond our wildest dreams.
Yeah, right on. Now we got a few minutes left. I want to talk about the connections between everything that happens in this phenomena and UFOs, paranormal activity. I know it's all connected in some way, and some of the high strangeness areas that seem to be concentrated with this stuff. Like Skinwalker Ranch, the Meadow, where is it, Blind Frog, all these places. Just say in the United States, I know they're all over the world, but some of these places have such high concentrations of strange activity, UFOs, paranormal activity, even Bigfoots. Why do you think that is? Do you think there's something going on in that area itself that is attracting this activity?
Absolutely. I just got back from the UK. I was hanging out with Steve Mera, and he works with Barry Fitzgerald. My friend Vitaly was there. They were up at Zohar Entertainment, and he does a lot of research into these places, as well as another guy I know has been on your show, Harry Challenger of the Flying Saucer Review. These guys go out and they investigate these sites with a lot of energy. And they mentioned to me Skinwalker Ranch. We have places here on Earth that you could say, whether they operate with ley lines, and it's just like Dr. Ivan Sanderson wrote about in 1972 about vile vortices. There's places on the earth that have these certain portals and connections. And what people don't realize is that we are sharing this earth and this space with a multi-dimensional reality. There's all sorts of other folks living here, and it's in layers that they occupy it. And you could say that right now, even in your living room, you're sharing it with countless other folks and intelligences that are spilling out into this area. Just like when we look at the aspect of dark matter, and we look out in space, we say, oh, there's nothing there in that empty space. Well, it's filled with frequencies and different aspects of realities. So with that being said, it's very interesting that we were looking at the idea of where contactees go into these places. And it's very strange that the things that come through, the entities, the intelligences, it's sort of like a highway, Chris. That one thing that's very interesting that we found is that in these places that were a lot of ET contact was taking place, there were a lot of suicides there. There's like suicide benches in almost all these places. And when I visited these spots with Harry Challenger, let's say, with his contactees, they were saying that these were like portals for the ETs to come through. And they had these incredible ships that I experienced myself out there, that I saw with my own eyes, this incredible, massive mothership that came through. But they have landings, they have the beings come out there. There's all kinds of folks from different backgrounds that are popping through these places. And some of these places, it's very interesting. They get this different frequency or energy that shifts in certain equinoxes, or when the light hits it, or that could be at sunset, or the sun comes down in a special way. And that's what's interesting about Steve Mera's work. If you guys know who Steve Mera is, I don't know if you've had Steve Mera on your show. If you haven't, you should get Steve Mera on. He'll fascinate you. He has written some scientific papers on this, and they've actually taken time displacement devices and looked at, nanogravity measuring tools, and done satellite scans, and actually looked at these spots. So there are these portals and networks and energetic vortexes all around the earth. And again, Chris, if you look at why our sacred sites are built where they are, it's not an accident. It's not a coincidence that you see things built in certain places, that whether it's on the 33rd parallel, or whether you look at where Stonehenge is next to Avebury, and you see there's 900 megalithic henges that go all the way up to Naphtali in Egypt. They're all built in a certain formation. And we know that things like those circles, why do we do things in circles on these sacred places? Whether it's Stonehenge, or fairy circles, or crop circles, or magic circles, or healing circles, that's because that you take, when you take this circle, you're taking time and space and bending it in on itself, and you're basically opening up a wormhole or a tunnel. So it's amazing that these places exist all around us.
It is, and I've come to the realization how profoundly this phenomenon, extraterrestrials, is connected to the afterlife and spirituality. I've heard a lot more people talking about having contact experiences now, but not only that, after their experience, they seek spirituality. They become, a better person. They want to do better. They want to seek more about the nature of reality. And the same thing happened to myself. I had a contact experience and, became much more spiritual seeking after that. And that only happened, a couple of years ago, which was very profound. But is that what you found as well, that this is a spiritual phenomenon? It's also connected to life after death and paranormal, and it's here to teach us something, right?
That's exactly what's happening. And there's a study that just came out that's been published in the last day, where they're talking about activity that they've measured in the brain after someone dies. Well, that's not new information. We've heard forever the idea of hypoxia, which is a lack of oxygen to the brain. And there's been tests where they have done to recreate hypoxia. And people do have hallucinations, these minor fleeting hallucinations of nothingness. And they're so insignificant that they don't leave the long lasting positive effects that you get from having a near-death experience. So people that have had near-death experiences, they have these incredibly transformative experiences where sometimes, they'll be floating above their bed, looking down at themselves in the hospital room, and they've been able to describe what the doctors were saying or what the doctors were wearing. You got blind people talking about what the doctors were, instruments they were using, operating on the back of their head, on crazy stuff like that. They've seen relatives. They have looked at their life through a 360-degree panoramic life review. And I'll tell you something, it absolutely is all connected because of who we are. It's like my friend, Daniel Brinkley, always says, and he's an NDE survivor, he says, you are a great and mighty, powerful spiritual being with dignity, direction, and purpose. And it's stories like his that I encourage you all to go and listen to. Go on YouTube and get the movie off there called Saved by the Light and watch that movie. And this shows Daniel's life. That then if you have the time, and I highly recommend you go buy the books too, Saved by the Light, Secrets of the Light, and his work. But in that movie, you have Eric Roberts playing him, and you see that Daniel, here's a guy that had this Marine Corps background. He was a huge asshole all his life, and he wasn't very nice to people earlier on in his life. And he was struck by lightning, dead for 28 minutes. He is floating above himself, looks down at a burnt, crisp version of him on the floor with these paramedics showing up. And he came out of that experience to be one of the first NDE cases that was studied by the Raymond Moody with that Life After Life work. And he had these incredible psychic abilities that came out after that, where he could win at any gambling game. He was able to see world events and predict them, from Chernobyl, the wall falling, to even what's happening now. And he wrote these best-selling books that were made into movies. And it's just, his life was so incredible that after that, he transformed his entire life to the point now where he has been a hospice counselor, helping people at their bedside. And I'll tell you something, Chris, the people I've talked to who have had NDEs, a lot of them have seen extraterrestrials, and the ETs have been aware of their life plan and why they came here. And before we leave the subject, one thing I want to highly recommend all of you do, that if you're interested in the idea about near-death experiences, about extraterrestrials, where we come from, who you are, I recommend you go get the books of Garnet Schulhauser. And I know you've had him on your show, Chris. I know you've met him, but Garnet Schulhauser's books will change your life. Just get them.
Yeah, excellent work there. Excellent books. And Jonny, this was fantastic as usual. That hour went by super fast. I know you got to get going, but before you go, tell us a little bit about how the mystery tours have been going in Peru and Egypt with Muhammad and Brian Forrester.
Thank you so much for asking, and it's always a pleasure to be here with you, Chris. And I'm so happy to see your show grow. And I want everybody out there to like Chris's videos, to share them with your friends, to subscribe and really give them your support, because it's shows like this that really make a big difference. And it's not easy out there to have a show like this and to discuss these subjects anymore. Yeah. So I know how much work it goes into to do this. So thank you so much. As for the tours and what's going on, we have a tour coming up in Egypt with Muhammad. It's called the Immortal Light Tour from May 17th through the 29th. It's an amazing lineup of folks. You have the likes of Hank Kracher, who is a professor and looks at esoteric subjects. We got the great Timothy Hogan, who's a Masonic author, into the esoteric and the great mysteries. We have J.P. Hegg. We have Paul Elder from the Monroe Institute teaching remote viewing. I'm going to be there. Zhuzhana's there. And I always love it when Muhammad is translating the hieroglyphics and getting the academic side of the history. We have Lost Ancient Technology. We're making some big discoveries there. There's the Nile Cruise. It's so much fun. You can go to Saba Tours. That's SABA tours.net. And everyone should join us for that. Later this year, I have a great tour out, a great conference out there in the UK for anyone out on this side of the continent. You know, we have the Chariots of the Gods conference with Eric Von Doniken. You have Giorgio there. You have myself. You have Steve Mera, Maria Wheatley, Barry Fitzgerald. You have Dr. Teresa Bullard there. You have Andrew God. You got so many people. This is going to be an amazing conference. You don't want to miss it. It's June 24th through the 26th, and you can find that online and get tickets. Make sure you're there. It's going to be amazing. There are so many great things to look forward to coming up, Chris. And I just want to see another big conference that you and I can hang out, come out. I want to see them at the United States, the UFO MegaCon to come back next year.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd certainly love that. I had a great time at the last one. And Jonny, that was amazing. We'll definitely be talking again soon. So keep that calendar open, buddy. We'll talk again.
Thank you so much, Chris. Have an amazing night. And to all your listeners, keep watching Forbidden Knowledge News.
Thank you so much. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again tomorrow.